Chapter 22. Hire and work effectively with a virtual assistant. I used to be an assistant in Hollywood as my full-time job. While I found Hollywood to generally be a not-so-great work environment, I did work for a few great people who taught me a lot about what it means to work smarter, not harder. When it came time for me to hire a full-time virtual assistant to help with what I needed done, I was able to pull from a lot of my experience doing the role to create frameworks to work effectively with my virtual assistant. Full disclosure, I no longer work with a virtual assistant, but that's simply because I instead hire researchers, proofreaders, editors, bookkeepers, and other specialists on a freelance basis to do what I used to have a virtual assistant do. Depending on what your freelance workload looks like and how you want to scale your freelancing, you may want to hire both a virtual assistant and specialists, or just one or the other. We'll cover outsourcing to specialists more in the next chapter, but for now, let's talk about virtual assistants specifically. When to hire a virtual assistant. It's 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. You're about to dive into a day of back-to-back meetings, and you've got 3 startups breathing down your back. Each one wants quick turnarounds by end of day, with new copy to be written, and they're all willing to pay rush fees to get their deliverables done fast. You've also just finished writing an ebook for a client, but you don't have the time to proofread. Oh, and what about that payment that's supposed to come in from a client who had you invoice their billing department? Did they get your bank details? How can you handle all of this when you're going to be on 8 video calls today? Answer, you can't. You're at a fork in the road. You can either raise your rates to decrease the number of clients you have, which will increase your earnings and reduce your frantic state, or you can hire a virtual assistant. In fact, you might even want to do both. That way, you can get more time and space with higher rates, and that additional revenue can go to hiring a virtual assistant to take over the busy work you don't want to do. If you've finally gotten overbooked and busy, it's time to create a path to scaling. Scaling your freelance business looks different depending on what your goals are, and if your goal is to build out a full-service marketing agency or even simply decrease the amount of busy work you have to do each week, hiring a virtual assistant can help with that. How to hire a virtual assistant. There are a few different ways to go about the hiring process when you're looking for your new partner in crime. I've always found it easier to do the hiring myself. I started by hiring friends who needed work and then began posting formal job postings on job platforms. You have 3 options when it comes to hiring a virtual assistant. Hire a 1099 freelancer. You can keep things simple by hiring freelance talent from a freelance platform and making sure your hired freelancer has good reviews and a track record. Remember, there are legal guidelines when it comes to hiring freelance talent. Your virtual assistant can be assigned tasks by you, but you can't control A, how they work, B, when they work. So if you need a virtual assistant to log on at a certain time and be available when you need them to be, that's not a freelancer. That's an employee. You don't want to get in trouble with the law when it comes to freelancer misclassification, so be sure to consult with a lawyer when adding to your team. Hire a company. There are companies that offer virtual assistant services, and you can hire them to handle the sourcing of a virtual assistant. If something goes wrong, they can also connect you with a new assistant. This can be helpful as most of these candidates, ideally, are vetted and trained by the company itself, so there's a standard of quality that's being ensured compared to taking a risk on a random freelancer. Hire an employee. When I hired a virtual assistant, I hired them as a full-time employee through my company with the help of a lawyer and accountant. We got them set up on payroll and all that jazz. Workers' comp and general liability policies are also usually required, depending on the laws in your state. Getting your employee set up properly does require professional help in order to make sure you're staying compliant with everything, so don't skimp on this. No matter how you hire a virtual assistant, you've still got to pick someone who gels with you and the way you work. When it's time to interview candidates, make sure you're clear on their job description. What are your expectations for them? Are they working for you on a freelance basis or part-time or full-time? When do they need to be available for tasks? Are they pleasant and do they seem trustworthy? I recommend asking some, if not all, of the below questions in an interview. What do you like about being a virtual assistant? Tell me about your resume. What was your favorite past employer or client to work for? What do you not enjoy about your work? Can you share with me a time where something went wrong and how did you handle it? If I asked for your help on a typical task you would need help with, how would you go about completing it? Is being a virtual assistant a stepping stone to another path? If so, where do you want to go? What is one thing you're looking to improve about the way you work? These questions can help you get a sense of if someone has a good attitude or is just doing this job for a quick buck, or if they're detail-oriented and motivated by helping others. Remember, this virtual assistant will probably be handling some sensitive documents such as credit card information or other details you'll need to loop them into so they can help you. It's important to get a sense of what motivates them and if they're going to be a good team member. When you make hiring mistakes. As my freelance career was starting to take off, I had hired a virtual assistant who had met with me right after she graduated, and she seemed to care about the things I did, and she was hungry for work. She was in between assistant jobs, and I was in need of a new virtual assistant. So I called her up and offered her an hourly wage that was above what most postgraduate assistants were making with no experience, and she accepted. However, when she saw how much I was making, she started to turn sour. Why wasn't she getting paid more? What she didn't see, of course, was that by the time I hired her, I was 4 years into my freelancing career. I had worked crazy hours to get to a place where I could make quite a bit of money, and I had hired a full team of editors and proofreaders at that point to help with different freelance projects. I was also investing in art projects made by friends of mine, so the money I was making was not just paying for my expenses, it was being spent on storytelling I wanted to support and make real. I also gave out regular bonuses to team members who were going above and beyond. I still do, and her compensation was fair and what she agreed to before starting with me. That assistant just grew even more sour, and her work deteriorated even as I tried to loop her into creative projects to help her feel emboldened and part of more fun things instead of just admin work. I eventually had to fire her, but didn't do so quickly enough. You're going to make hiring mistakes. The adage of hire slow, fire fast is something to take to heart. Business isn't personal, which can create a sticky situation if you hire friends or family, but we're humans, so even if you're letting someone go because they clearly don't want to do a role anymore, they're still going to feel the bitter sting of rejection. Understand this and be the bigger person. Always stay polite, centered, and fire people quickly so they can find the environment that is a better fit for them. The biggest lesson I've learned with hard things is to handle them as they come. Don't ignore them or hope they'll resolve themselves on their own. The monster and anxiety of the situation will just grow bigger and more complicated the more you turn away from it. The weed sucks the life out of the garden it is allowed to grow in. When hiring an assistant, start with a test period, either a single assignment or a fixed period of time, and make sure your potential assistant knows this is a trial time designed for you both to see if it's a good fit. After you hire someone, make sure you've created systems that reward them for great work and keep them motivated even through the slog that is endless admin work. Bonuses and performance reviews can help, as admin work isn't the most exciting field. Bonuses can reinforce great work, and performance reviews can offer areas to improve. If you decide to work with friends and family, understand that you're risking that relationship. Great friendships can lead to great working relationships, but if you and that person aren't aligned, then things can get sticky. I love working with people I know who I respect, but I've also lost friendships because I realized that people don't prioritize work or creative collaborations in the way that I do. So just be aware of the risks you're taking on when working with friends in any capacity. I don't mean to scare you off of hiring virtual assistants. I've also worked with virtual assistants who made my life easier and were a joy to work with. Just take the hiring process seriously and make sure you have a good contract in place if things go wrong. Ways freelance writers can work effectively with virtual assistants. When I was working as an assistant in Hollywood, the biggest barrier to doing my job well was a boss who couldn't communicate or wasn't approachable when I had questions I needed answered. The same goes for your virtual assistant. Realize that you'll probably need to be more hands-on in the beginning as your assistant gets to know what you need help with. Any learning period to be proficient and get a handle on a job is about 3 months. Don't ask me why, but it's almost a law of physics. If someone hasn't caught on by then and made things easier for you, they never will. As a freelance writer, you're going to want to get clear on how your virtual assistant can help you. They could assist with research, proofreading, or even with invoicing and contract management, but make sure you have final approval of any contracts before they get sent out. When it comes to financial stuff, I generally recommend outsourcing that to a business manager instead, but some freelancers prefer to have their virtual assistant handle everything. Another area your virtual assistant comes in handy is with client outreach. As I mentioned in the example in the last chapter, your virtual assistant can save you dozens of hours just by taking over all of your potential client outreach. They can submit proposals for you on freelance platforms, they can help you with sending cold reach outs, and they can even research potential clients you might be able to work with. You can also have your virtual assistant cultivate a daily digest of interesting news for you, or do a roundup of new podcasts worth listening to in your niche. Get creative and consider all of the things that are both necessary and nice to have, and prioritize your virtual assistant's to-do list accordingly. In terms of best practices, here are some of my top tips when it comes to working with virtual assistants. Set weekly meetings with your virtual assistant. If your assistant is a full-time employee, consider daily meetings in the beginning. If they're part-time, maybe meet 2-3 times per week. Or if you're working with a freelancer, try meeting with them once per week. As you continue to work together, you'll be able to reduce the number of times you meet with them or the length of your meetings. Create a collaborative to-do list with deadlines. One of the key parts of working with a virtual assistant is making sure you're on the same page as them when it comes to deadlines and deliverables. You can create a collaborative to-do list or project center in a project management tool, or you can keep it simple with a shared to-do list app. No matter what platform you use, make sure your assistant gets reminders when deadlines are approaching, and that you can both add items to the to-do lists. After a call with your virtual assistant, make it a habit that they add any new to-do list items to their shared list within an hour after the call, so you know they're on it. That way you can prevent missed deadlines or unclear requirements. Deadlines are essential to getting things done. Thinking someone is going to accomplish something as fast as they can almost never works, because their motivation is not yours. They aren't driving the business, they are doing what they're being told to do. Audit what you're outsourcing each week. Do you still have too much on your plate? Are there other things your virtual assistant could do to help you? Outsource as much as you can. If you've taken the time to hire and train a virtual assistant, they should be helping you get to a place where you're not having to sweat the small stuff. 2 can be better than 1. Before deciding that a virtual assistant isn't working out for you, may want to consider if hiring someone else can help. One virtual assistant may only be able to do their tasks about 70% as well as you would do if you were handling the tasks on your own. It's your business after all, you care more. But if you hire 2 virtual assistants who both can do their job 70% as well as if you were doing the tasks yourself, then you've got 140% competency, which is an improvement on you running yourself ragged and never outsourcing anything. However, don't just use hiring someone else as a band-aid solution if your first assistant isn't working well with you or handling their workload well. Understand the difference between personal tasks and business tasks. If you know from the jump you want your virtual assistant to handle personal tasks like booking concert tickets and dinner reservations for you, make sure they know in advance what they're signing up for. Some assistants prefer to only work on business tasks, and others are okay doing both. Personal assistants are generally paid at a lower rate than business-focused assistants, but not always. And this stigma is especially true in cities like LA and NYC, where high-income households often have a first assistant who handles their business admin work and a second assistant who handles their personal errands and reservations. As a former first assistant, I dreaded handling personal tasks, as they felt like they were higher stakes and didn't really drive my boss's business forward. While this stigma doesn't ring true for most virtual assistants, just make sure you're transparent about the types of tasks you'll need help with in your job description. Evaluate your virtual assistant's bandwidth. As you work with a virtual assistant, you may see their job performance dip over time. It's natural for freelancers and employees to have periods of time where they struggle. Just keep an eye out for the signs they're burned out or have too much on their plate, particularly if they are full-time employees. Most of us overperform when we get started at a new job and then settle into our normal work ethic. If your virtual assistant is getting sloppy, it might be because they are losing motivation, not able to handle the tasks you're giving them, or they have something going on in their personal life. It's up to you to check in and see what's going on. From there, you have a few choices. Find a new virtual assistant with a higher bandwidth, give your virtual assistant some time off, or reduce their workload. If the value they're bringing is starting to slide, it might not make financial sense to keep them on. This happened with a virtual assistant I was working with, and after trying to accommodate her for a few months and get to the root of the problem, I eventually had to let her go and figure out how to automate every part of her job. This is part of the reason I don't work with virtual assistants as much anymore, but I'm also not looking to scale into an agency model. Overall, virtual assistants can be awesome assets to you and your freelance writing work. They can help you get back more time, grow your freelancing, and transition into an agency model if that makes sense for you and your interests. Amy's Field Notes, the 1-year turnover rule. I've hired dozens and dozens of people for a variety of different roles. I've hired web designers, graphic designers, editors, proofreaders, assistants, the list goes on. That's why when I find someone I love working with, I pay well and give them incentives to stick around. Something happens when the year mark hits, though. Almost every freelancer I've worked with gets to the year mark of working with me and my team, and then the work starts to suffer in ways that can't be ignored. I don't blame people. After doing anything for a year, it might be time for a change. The high-intensity need to impress a new boss is strong at the beginning. You burn bright, but then over time, it's easy to get comfortable. And the thing with things that burn twice as bright, they last half as long. The humans you hire aren't robots, so understand their motivation will come and go in waves. Either ride out the dips, maybe hire someone else to help, or look elsewhere for new talent. I create these voiceovers using Wondercraft AI, a text-to-speech tool that speaks in your voice so you can create more podcasts, audiobooks, and voiceovers, all by just dropping in some text. Use my code SUTO50, SUTO50, or the link in the description below to get 50% off your Wondercraft AI subscription. I get a small commission if you use my code, so thanks for your support. Sending creativity and good writing vibes your way. Amy.